Today, Blake Cheek from Ingram Micro joins me, and the topic of conversation is navigating software licensing for customer success. So, not to delay any further, I'd like to turn things over to Blake. Blake?
Awesome. Hey, yeah, thank you, Sandy. And thanks everyone for joining with us today. Very excited to be covering this topic. It always draws a crowd, and that's because it's always changing and people have questions about it. It's hard to keep up with. And I'll get more into that probably shortly. But just to quickly introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, I am Blake Cheek. I work for Ingram Micro. I am a pre-sales engineer. I've been in a pre-sales role for a couple of years now. Out of my whole Dynamics and Power Platform journey, I was previously just in sales, really doing net new business. Prior to that, got into the pre-sales role, and quite honestly, there's a huge gap. There's a lot to really be fulfilled there, right? We have great implementation partners like Azamba to help sort of carry the deployment across the finish line. But some stuff really kind of falls in between sales and deployment. And for me, licensing is actually one of those things. So again, really great to be here and happy to talk about licensing with everyone.
Excellent. Well, thanks for introducing yourself, Blake. Where do we want to start here? Do we want to get to just some of the basics, or where would you like to begin to take everybody on this journey?
Yeah, sure. I think we start with the basics for sure. You know, there's a lot out there, and there's been a lot that's changed recently. I might have some collateral and some stuff to sort of pull up along with this. We'll kind of play it by ear and see what
Awesome.
happens.
Sounds
But
good.
you know, contrary to what people who aren't in SaaS, may not know, because some of the things have changed, at least on the cloud, at least on the SaaS side of Dynamics, most everything is going to be a per user license by and large, with a few exceptions on the Dynamics Power Platform, Power BI side. Everything you're going to be looking at is a user license. So when you're thinking about licensing for your organization or for your client's organization, it's really going to come down to um, what's everybody doing. It's almost beneficial for people to have build out a spreadsheet or something like that to think about users and their roles. And some of them may already be doing this if they are already buying other Microsoft products. You may have some sort of chart that outlines, okay, well, I have, Jimmy, Tommy, and Susie, and they're using Business Premium or E3. So some of that may already be in place, but you really want to think about the role of the individual and what they're doing. So, for instance, CRM or, D365 sales, it's, technically known, CRM being more of a colloquial term these days. You really need to think about what each person needs, right? So if I'm deploying CRM, or if I'm thinking about licensing CRM for a client, we first need to think about, all right, well, do they want sales professional? Do they want sales enterprise? Do they want sales premium? And once we kind of have that nailed down, we need to think about who actually needs that license. And again, so just on a user basis. So you and I might be in the CRM working on entering in leads, opportunities, contacts, things of that nature every day. So, hey, we need a license. But you may also have someone who doesn't need to really be interacting with the records that heavily, and perhaps they just need a team member license. So it's all going to come down to sort of a user basis. That's kind of different from on the traditional, like on-prem ERP side of things, people who have had Dynamics GP or something in the past where licensing was more concurrent. So that's probably where we want to start and think about licensing. Think of it, everything as being at the user level. And then we need to think about the core component of each product before we ever worry about add-ons and we ever worry about features. A conversation that I have with Peter a lot of times, right, is that the core product has to be able to do what you want it to do before you go and get excited about some of these additional features around a particular product. We saw that a lot in the customer service side, certainly with things like omnichannel, which is exciting add-on, yes, in its own regard, but people got excited about it until they saw, hey, I already have to have customer service enterprise, and then this is going to double my license cost. And then people got less excited generally about products like that. But we think about, if I'm just going down sort of the pricing list, the product list for Dynamics 365, you have Business Central, which is a great sort of small to mid-market ERP solution. You're going to have options in both Essentials and Premium there. So the thing that you have to worry about with Business Central is the same you have to worry about with some components of CRM, which is you have to worry about what's good for the organization, because you're not going to mix and match Essentials and Premium in an environment the same way you wouldn't mix and match Sales Professional and Enterprise in the same environment, or shouldn't be mixing and matching those in the same environment. And that's one thing that I do actually want to sort of put a big asterisk next to today, Sandy, as we go through this conversation. And that is, there's a difference between what's appropriate in terms of licensing and what's technically enforced. So, because it's just kind of helps stave off the people who are like, oh, well, I got away with this, or I got away with this. Maybe you did, right? But that's not compliant. And my role is to not enforce compliance, is to recommend what is appropriate and what is compliant. But tying it back again, yeah. So you have Business Central, Essentials, and Premium. You kind of need to decide what's best for your organization there. Same with Customer Service Pro and Enterprise, Sales Pro and Enterprise, and of course there's Premium and MRS. And we can go into the higher tiers, but there's not a huge demand. I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. You get into some of the AI, some of the Copilot features with sales now, with going Sales Enterprise. So I think there's a little more incentive. We'll probably see a little more, a few more people sort of biting on that. And then you get into things like your finance and operations products, which do get dicey for a lot of people. There's a lot of MSPs out there not extremely versed in F&O licensing. It is a very complex and nuanced topic in and of itself. I will probably only touch on it a little bit here. F&O has licensing reports, but really compared to some of your flagship product licensing with Sales, CRM, Power Apps, Power BI, and such, it's F&O licensing can be a little bit of the Wild West. And so I understand why people get frustrated or perhaps tend to avoid stuff like that, although it's nice that the products are very aptly named on the F&O side.
Well,
we had
as you mentioned, right, there's all the different types of licensing when you come to Dynamics, and with F&O,
oh yeah,
and with BC as well. I mean, not only do you have your full use licenses, but you also have your team licenses, you have device licenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mix and match of various licensings that can be deployed in a single deployment.
Well, and we haven't even gotten to base and attach, right?
Right.
So that's sort of the other component. So taking a really hard shift in that direction and going back to the spreadsheet concept that I have, if you have your users listed out in a single column over here, and then across subsequent columns, you have perhaps what their duties need to be, and you can start to sort of add up or conclude who might need a base and who might need an attached license. Because, hey, step one on our journey is, if you have a user with multiple roles, make sure that if you can, you don't get them a base license for each thing.
Exactly.
It will work. Their user access and their functions will appropriately be there. Microsoft's certainly not going to say, hey, you know what, slow down. You can actually get away with an attached license here. They're not going to stop you from overspending, but you certainly can. And you need to know what that means for what. A common thing that I hear, Sandy, and you've probably heard this from people too about attached licenses, is they think, okay, well, that means once I've bought one customer service enterprise license for the organization, everyone else who needs customer service can get it at an attached price, right?
If it was only that easy.
Well, if it was only that too good to be true.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that in thinking about your spreadsheet, if you can sort of start to check off, all right, well, this person needs sales. Cool. Do they also need customer service? Oh, they do. Great. So let's put another check in that column. And then when we're looking at the end, we can see what they can base and what they can attach. I think that brings us to probably, obviously, the first big visual that everyone needs to be aware of. And just so you know, most of my material today is sourced from the licensing guides, both for Dynamics and Power Platform. They should be your highest authoritative document on this topic. So when I share out some of this right here and we look at this matrix, this is sort of what we want people to be aware of, what we want people to be cognizant of, right? And it's a lot like the buy one, get one 50% off at a store. What's your full priced item going to be? Always the most expensive one, right? And so that's how a lot of your base and attach is going to work. As you see here, you know, finance has a good number of, for instance, attached licenses. So you can buy finance as a base and attach a ton of stuff, but there's not a ton of stuff that can be a base that you attach finance onto unless it's also equally or more expensive. This is a good chart for a lot of folks too, because there's been, again, a ton of changes in this lately. Business Central has seen some additional attach motions that it has not seen previously in the past. So we've always known Sales Pro and Customer Service Pro, but now we're starting to see on the premium side, Sales Enterprise and Customer Service Enterprise. So that's opening up accessibility to the Business Central product to a larger range of perhaps CRM users than there's been in the past, or at least at a more cost-effective standpoint. Again, no one was ever preventing you from buying these products both at full base price, but it does exist. So again, I'd recommend anyone, you know, when you're thinking about this, to sort of familiarize yourself, or at least know how to get to this so that you understand where your base and attach pricing comes from, right? This is sort of the 101 of optimizing cost for these types of projects.
Right. And I understand too that there's a relationship between Dynamics 365 licensing and Power App licensing. Can you explain a little bit, because I think that gets confusing for people?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is a great relationship between D365 and Power Apps, and some of that comes from, and you know, I'm not shy to say this, even in a demo myself. When you look at some of these customer engagement applications, especially Sales Pro, Sales Enterprise, you know what? It's packaged IP. It's a Power App. It's a Power App. You know, so we have to automatically think about that. We have to think about the fact that Dataverse is really the fabric, not the Microsoft fabric, but the fabric that holds these things together. And so there is a lot of interactivity. What I mean by that is there are a lot of additional use rights around things like Power Apps, Power Automate, that you can get just by virtue of a Dynamics 365 license. And so that's going to sort of tie us actually into another visual that we'll find over on the Power Platform licensing guide. So I'm still sharing my screen. So we're going to start with Power Apps. And again, another recent name change that we all need to familiarize ourselves with. Power Apps per user is now Power Apps Premium. Same feature set, different name. So when we think about Power Apps Premium and we get on down here to sort of this next chart, and we look at this column here around select D365 Pro and Enterprise licenses, we see that we can run custom apps within that same environment that our D365 application is in, right? Because when you deploy sales, when you deploy customer service, first step before you even get the app configured, got to create an environment if you don't have one already. So now we can build Power Apps in that environment. As we see here, those apps can have standard connectors. They can have premium or custom connectors. They have full Dataverse access. So if you have a Dynamics 365 license and you want to start building apps or automations to help simplify some of that, to help extend some of that functionality and make the product maybe more friendly for your end users, you can certainly start to do that. So I would tell anyone who's got a Dynamics 365 license to not shy away from exploring things like Power Apps, because it's there. You have to be careful about some of the tables that you're accessing and using. If you don't also have a Dynamics license on top of that, I don't really want to get into, the big bad word in terms of licensing, which is multiplexing. But you would want to stay away from that if you're thinking about accessing restricted tables. But there's still a ton that you can be doing around that. Perhaps you don't need all of the sales functionality, or perhaps you need an app that only pulls from one of those tables, again, in Dataverse. And as long as it's not restricted, then the opportunity is there. But if you have these licenses, explore. If you're an MSP and you have clients, encourage them to explore. This is sort of this is gratis, right? This is free and available to them, just by nature of already having that D365 license.
Right. And are there other things that they can do for free with those Dynamics and Power App licenses as well?
Yeah. So you have your D365 license, so you already get probably a pretty generous Dataverse storage. As you see here, you get the Power Apps component. If we go up here, we can look at Power Automate, who has a similar chart a little further down here. So, and this is a little more confusing. There's been a lot more recent changes out there on this. I've talked about it a little bit on LinkedIn and YouTube to date, but it's there. So we see under select D365 licenses, which is, sorry if it's a little small. This is quite a large table, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna change the view a little bit. I have you on the side, and I'm gonna switch the view a little bit so they're just getting that.
Yeah, sure. So, you can do cloud flows, which I don't think is a surprise. Business process flows, which should also not come as a surprise, right? Because we see some of those business process flows built into a sales deployment as it is, right? If I'm doing an opportunity tracking, I have a business process flow across the top. Again, that shouldn't surprise anyone. But we have access to things like standard connectors, premium connectors, custom connectors, access to Dataverse. So again, we should be taking advantage of that. A lot of Power Apps use Power Automate on the back end to help get some things done anyway. And then we go down all the way to Power Pages, which we've known were Dynamics portals and Power Apps portals and some of this other stuff in the past. But currently, the current iteration is Power Pages, right? And we see, again, some of the same rules applying here. So as long as you're using something within the same environment as D365, standard connectors, premium connectors, Dataverse access. So, I know that Azamba, right? I know that you have used some of these things in the past, both in terms of having a portal for your customer support. Another big use case we see around Power Pages is perhaps having an internal knowledge base, even for your own company. So you may have KB articles published if you have very tight policies and procedures, and you can put all that in a portal where people can easily search and find the answers for those types of things that they need. So there's a lot there.
We use them for our customer portal, like you said, but we're also working on our partner portal too. And that's all being done in Power Pages. So we're excited to release that. So, yep, we're taking advantage of the licensing for sure.
Exactly. And it's all free, right? It's all complimentary as part of your license. And I was thinking about a good analogy yesterday to perhaps use on the call and, racking my brain. And, I'm an analogy guy, Peter. I know you've probably heard a million analogies from Peter over the course of time as well. And the best thing I can come up with is I'm kind of a car guy. I have a little group chat. I have a couple of friends. We love to talk about cars. And for me, the thing is, your car, right? Your license comes with all these features, and it's almost silly or short-sighted to not take advantage of as many of them as possible, even if you don't think you're going to like them or going to want to take advantage of them. A while back, I don't own this car now, but a while back, I bought a car that had heated seats. And I thought, before I ever owned a car with the heated seats, I said, this is dumb. I live in the Southeast. It is never cold here. I have no need for a heated seat. But once you use a heated seat a couple of times, you realize this is a wonderful feature. And so some of these add-ons, some of these entitlements that you're getting as part of your Dynamics 365 license are like heated seats. You might be skeptical. Use it, and then see if you still feel skeptical. There are businesses who have Dynamics who are leveraging the Power Apps and Power Automate components of Dynamics that are making powerful solutions. They're making employee onboarding solutions In Business Central, we see them making approval flows all the time because, hey, if you get a purchase order over a certain amount, you might want somebody in management to sign off on that before it goes out. So we see people leveraging these to go way beyond the initial solution, right? And building and bending and customizing these things to their needs, because I don't know if Microsoft knows it or not. These products are meant for customization. These are Dynamics products, by and large, are not meant for out of the box deployment.
Right. And now you said the E word, entitlements, a few minutes ago there. Do you want to expand on that? Because I don't know if everybody in the audience actually understands entitlements.
Yeah, sure. A lot of us think it's a millennial term, right? We're all entitled to something, but when you look it up, I mean, the definition even of just entitlement is something you were owed. And so we see that a lot throughout the licensing guide for Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. They may call it accruals. They may sort of refer to it by other names. But if we were to Control F on any of these, you'd probably have 50, 70 results for entitlements come up. But I'm going to use the Dynamics 365 licensing guide and see if I can. So yeah, I mean, I got 22 results just come up here. So we're going to start to see some of that as I get further on down here. So this is actually one of the best tables for me that represents entitlements. This is something that everyone needs to think about in terms of their licensing, and that is sort of that capacity. It's interesting to have Business Central over here because everything else is talking about usually Dataverse capacity. So it's kind of fun to have Business Central over here, but we'll ignore that for a minute. And let's think about things like Sales Pro or Customer Service Pro. And that's over here sort of on this side of the screen, sort of a couple from the end. And so you're going to get a default entitlement of Dataverse storage just by virtue of having Power Apps, or excuse me, I almost called it Power Apps per user, a Power Apps Premium license, or by having Sales Pro or Customer Service Pro. Your Dataverse gets something, right? Because otherwise you just have your default environment, and programming, developing default environment is a whole other conversation for another time. Yeah. But when we look at the difference between the Sales Pro and the Sales Enterprise columns here, we start to see some differences. So we're getting our 10, our 20, and our 2 database file log capacity, either one. But now we start to see things that we're accruing if we go with Sales Enterprise, things we're not getting in Sales Pro. So now we see, oh, look, I get an additional 2 gigabytes of file storage every time I add a Sales Enterprise license versus a Sales Pro license. And stuff like this starts to really expand on the value we're getting in a license, because sure, Sales Enterprise is a little bit more, but we see we're already getting Sales Copilot. You might remember it as Viva Sales from a couple of months ago, right? But Sales Copilot now. Oh, and I'm also getting additional storage accrued. That's great, because now I know that when I deploy Sales Enterprise, I'm going to have a more complex environment, right? I have unlimited tables or entities. Again, another name change that happened in the past couple of years. I'm going to have more tables that might be configured. That will probably require more space. I am now allotted more space in order to help build out, code out, customize that environment. So that's sort of one example of entitlements. We get some other things here like sandboxes. We could go into some of that as well. Same over here on that Power Platform side. I'm going to stick with Power Pages for a minute because we're already here and no one wants to watch me scroll. But if I look at the 2 main motions for which Power Pages are licensed, right, which is authenticated users and anonymous users. If we look here, look, we see more accrual here. We have the ability to get 16 gigs of file storage accrued if we're doing authenticated users, and only 4 if we're doing anonymous users. Now, you still want to make the right use case. You don't want to make people log in when they don't need to, just so you can get 16 gigs of file storage. Please don't do that. No one's telling you to do that. But you get additional entitlements. Again, authenticated users is probably going to be a more complex environment. I think about mortgage servicing, right? Anyone who's been through the craziness of home buying in the past few years, You might have to log into your realtor's like a portal where you have to electronically sign documents. Shout out to some of the e-signature solutions who are making it easy to do that in things like portals now. But you might also be uploading documents. Where are those going to go? They're going to require file storage. Hence, you're getting more file storage. Other entitlements, again, I think of as going across the rows here, things like entitled to standard connectors, entitled to premium connectors. So when we think about entitlements, it's more than just the license itself. It's the sum of all that we are owed or able to leverage through virtue of owning that license.
Excellent. I think the other thing that's important too is, and you had talked about it a little bit ago when you were talking about, the spreadsheet, and how the client is using the software, that how they're using the software components today, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, that could change. So I think, when you're trying to make sure that you're doing the best you can for your clients, it's important to do those check-ins and see
Yeah.
how things have changed, right? And also the licensing may have changed and you may be able to save them money.
So that's a really great point, Sandy, and thank you for bringing that up because it's hard, and a lot of people have a set and forget type attitude with
Exactly.
this. We see this on the CRM side. That's why, honestly, I'm glad to be your licensing expert because at the end of the day, you need a history degree for some of this licensing because it's been years since people touch it. And the pace at which the names and products and offerings are changing now is about as fast as I've ever seen it. We had a nice lull between 2019 and about a year ago where things were pretty
Right.
settled in. And then in the past 6 months, it's picked up again to a unprecedented rate for as long as I've been doing this, honestly. So what happens is people buy these licenses, people deploy CRM, honestly, and it's been 4 years since anyone's looked at it or touched
Right.
it. Another reason to have a trusted partner if you're deploying CRM, right? You need someone to have those check-ins. You need to be looking at it. What's my Dataverse storage? Um, all of these things can really add up, and with NCE, we need to think about the term that we're buying the license at. You pay the premium if you want a true month to month. You get it at that face value if you're willing to commit to that year for licensing. But if you're an MSP out there, it's time to have those conversations. And sure, you might not be able to switch from Sales Pro to Sales Enterprise just willy-nilly at any point during the term, but it might be something you think about down the road if your sales process gets more complex. I know that Azamba is very big on having the MVP style approach, crawl, walk, run. Anyone
Right.
who knows Peter knows that's sort of the mantras that Azamba lives by, and that's great. But like you said, that leaves room for growth. That leaves room for scaling. You don't want to throw the kitchen sink at everyone all at once. I have these calls sometimes. Someone's like, you know what? We need to get them on Business Central. Oh, and we're going to build this custom app. And by the way, let's get them on CRM. Pump the brakes.
Right.
We will do all of that. I believe we can, but we need to roadmap it out. And so you start to have those conversations, but saving money. Sandy, a great example that just happened. Marketing just became customer insights or
Right.
part of customer insights, right? It wasn't just a
Yeah.
name change. Marketing is technically customer insights journeys,
Yeah.
but it's all part of customer insights. And I've had people come to me and said, hey, what's up? The price increased. Yeah, I mean, you can think of it that way, or you can think of it as now you're getting two products. You're getting marketing and you're getting customer insights, both now a part of the customer data platform. Oh, and by the way, you get 4 installs per application. And so now all of a sudden, if I had marketing and I had a marketing sandbox, or maybe I had 2 marketing environments because I'm multinational, or I have different marketing strategies for different regions, people who are using that will find that they're saving money now.
Right.
Another example, Power Automate. So Power Automate with attended RPA 3 months ago was a $40 SKU, $40 MSRP US. Now that's rolled into Power Automate Premium, and that's $15. So look at these changes, and if you have a trusted advisor, someone you're working with, reach out to them occasionally, especially around license renewal time, and start to ask those questions. Hey, how can we maximize spend here, right? Because if they have it in the budget and they're going to spend it, let them spend it, but let them spend it on what makes sense, and not just because there are people out there who do live by hey, let's have some overhead philosophy when it comes to CRM deployments. That's overspending, and I tell people that there's no rewards for having the best managed overhead in your Dynamics environment. There's no reward you get for having, oh, I keep 30% overhead on my Dataverse, or oh, I keep 5 extra sales licenses just in case. You're just overspending. You can add those whenever.
Well, that's why you guys are our heroes, right? Because Microsoft does make those changes. And you brought, I'm just thinking a few weeks back, I know Peter had to reach out to you because we had to happen to be bopping around on the Microsoft site. And, we have a Power App that we sell, right? Our CRM in a can application. And we went out to the Power Apps, and all of a sudden there was that, Power App Premium. And we're like, well, where did that $5 license go? I'm not seeing that. It's not being advertised anywhere on the website, just the $20. So, we have a ton of clients that are on the per app $5, right? So immediately I know Pete picked up the phone and called you and said, what's going on?
Yeah, exactly. They've so we could only, anything I say about Microsoft's business strategy, right, is only conjecture. I don't have insider, like, despite working heavily adjacent to them, I don't have any insight on their business strategy. I just have a little weather vane inside of my head, right? And so you kind of feel the wind blow in a certain direction, and you interpret those signs. It's almost like I don't know, throwing rocks in a pond and thinking the ripples make an image or something. But with Power Apps, if you notice, I have it up on my screen. Where's my $5 SKU? Where's my pay-as-you-go option? They're not there. They exist, but that's another area where we have to go back to these licensing guides to really understand that. So if we go to Power Apps now, just for example, they still make mention of per app. So it's not deprecated. It's still there. It's just not being advertised because of course the recommended motion is premium. And honestly, $20 for a user to be able to build all the apps they want, to get the additional Dataverse capacity, to get standard premium connection and all that at a per user, at a personal basis, that's great. I think you should. If a client out there can splurge for it, gosh, it's so good. But Power Apps per app at $5 per user per month, if the user is using less than, I don't know, mathematically, right, 4 apps.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't make sense. If I am a single purpose employee with a single purpose Power App in mind, $5 is great. I mean, these are all incredible values, honestly, in terms of SKUs. And it actually ties in. This is a good one. It ties into another great entitlement that is often not talked about. AI Builder service credits. I wish we had a show of hands right now. How many of you or your client are using AI Builder? How many of you have clients using AI Builder? Because that's another area in which the credit consumption rate, right? Because this is another one that requires Rosetta Stone to understand. It's another one where the consumption rate was drastically decreased across the board for a lot of AI Builder functions. So there, if you look at, I think it's Power App, or if we go to Power Automate Premium, sorry, if this bugs people the way I scroll.
That's okay.
But if you look at a Power Automate Premium license, you're getting 5,000 AI Builder service credits for $15. Okay, and you say, well, what's that mean? And it doesn't seem like a lot, right? Because if you buy an AI Builder credit off the shelf, it's like $500. It gives you like $1 million. So what's 5,000? But if we go in here and we look at a chart and we start to see, here's where we have a rate card. Show me where else you're going to find this. Again, the licensing guide. And we can start to see things like, oh, look, I want to do receipt processing and use their pre-built model. It's only 32 credits a page. I mean, someone want to do the napkin math on how many receipts I can process for 5,000 credits? It sounds like it's a lot. Sounds like it might be a couple hundred receipts, as a matter of fact. So why not why not build it? If you're an SMB, you might not process more than a handful of receipts a month or process more than a handful of documents a month. Use that for free. It's there for you.
Exactly. Now, obviously, this licensing guide is gold. Are there other resources and tools out there for partners to utilize, or is this the place to go? Besides, of course, calling you.
Yeah. Please call me. I love answering licensing questions, but I think the licensing guide is the gold standard. There's a couple of other sites that we want to be cognizant of when we think about purchasing and licensing in the world of Dynamics and Power Platform. So one of those I have up. Pricing page. I think it's really good, honestly, for what it is. I think it took them a long time to change the name of this from Viva Sales to Copilot, but hey, sometimes the tech teams move ahead of these teams. I think a little bit, but it's good to see some of this get updated so fast. Customer Insights, which they've now got under the marketing category,
Right.
but they got this updated like day one.
Right.
That pricing was updated day one. So anyone who had questions, it was already there. So I think pricing is important because we can sell the value of the product all we want, right? But the realistic aspect is companies have a budget and they have to stick within budget. And budget involves knowing what the cost of something is. I've heard salespeople say, "Oh, we'll just share the value and they'll find the money." We wish, right? But people have a budget. People budget for these things.
Well, the other thing, and we have educated consumers nowadays too, so they've probably already been out to that page.
Well, it's great because I love the transparent pricing.
Yeah.
If you and I and we're getting on a call with a partner about a CRM deployment, we can say, hey, look, this is D365 sales. Here's what you get. Here's how much it costs. Go to some of the competing websites and try and find that same information. It's nowhere to be found.
Right. Exactly.
This is one of the other ones that I truly love a ton. This is called the commercial licensing terms or product terms page. And mine's bookmarked to go straight to the Dynamics 365 services website. But if I can back up and go through a whole bunch of stuff, including licensing scenarios that I don't typically deal with. But we're going to stick with this. It's important to know that we're in the online services for Dynamics 365. Again, that's pretty much my scope. And under program, we have all of these different programs. We want to stick with the Microsoft customer agreement for now. That's what you're doing when you're going through CSP, right? But they have EA. If you're large enough to be doing EAs out there, it exists. Open, well, what's left of Open or Open Value is there. And we have some historical stuff here. So you can kind of look at previous terms. I don't find that to be that useful. But what I do find to be useful is all of what's down here on the page. So if we look, we see availability. And the way I would tell anyone is if we're under the right selection criteria, if it's under availability, we can sell it. If it's not here, we can't sell it. That's just part of the agreement. And then we have going further down, I don't mess with dual use rights, honestly, unless someone asks about it. You should be in the cloud by now, honestly. Or if you're trying to use dual use for a migration to the cloud, great. But if you're buying a cloud license hoping to deploy on-prem, I don't know what to tell you. Prerequisites, very important. It shows, for instance, if we look at team members, hey, you know what? You have to have a license for the product somewhere. You can't just license people with team members. It makes sense. Customer insights attached, we see, which used to be a category for marketing attached too, right? But now this is customer insights. But hey, you need to have 10 or more of this. Purchasing minimums on academic as well as across all programs. This is another one I get all the time. Hey, my customer really needs finance. Like, can I buy one or do I have to buy 20? Yeah, you do. Yeah. You got to buy 20. It's very explicitly spelled out there. And there used to be a caveat about like you could mix and match if it wasn't in CSP. I don't see that here right now, but I'm not coming over it with a fine-tooth comb. HR requires 5. So it's really nice to understand these things. And some of these, again, going back to that little Microsoft weather vane in my head, give you a good indicator as to what Microsoft's thinking about the product, right? Along with the pricing. If I have to buy 20 finance at the cost of 20 finance, if anyone's asking for a quantity of fewer than that, then they're probably not a finance candidate. Plain and simple.
That's what I was going to say, but that doesn't mean that you walk away from the deal. That means that you pivot and say, but have you considered Business Central?
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And bring them over that way. Yeah.
And you need to. That is a case of, hey, look, Business Central is an incredibly fast growing ERP. It's a Gartner market leader. It's got all the accolades and awards that you could want out of an ERP right now. However, why they chose to name it Business Central and not something more descriptive of what it does is beyond me. Because the reason people ask for finance is because the name finance literally tells you what it does. Bonus to this, down here, we can get into some of this. If we keep rolling down, again, MRS, some of this other stuff, let's get all the way to the bottom. Link to the licensing guide right there. So bookmark this page, and you'll always have a link to the licensing guide. I would be embarrassed to show you my folder that's full of licensing guides. There's probably 30, again, because I keep them from trailing months and even trailing years. The licensing guide has a change log within it, but it only goes back 90 days. So if I needed to know the way something was 6 months ago, I need to have a licensing guide from 6 months ago. That exists not only for Dynamics, but again, for our friends who are interested in other things, we have Power Platform here as well. So I could just as easily go into Power Platform, see all of the same information that I need to see, and go all the way down. And once again, get access to the licensing guide. This is one of about 3 or 4 places you can get the licensing guide. This is generally where I go if I'm not honestly just searching for it. The dynamicspartners.transform.microsoft.com often has a copy somewhere on there as well. If people aren't familiar with the Dynamics Partners or Power Platform Partners sites, please go and familiarize yourself there. There's an avalanche of resources available to you there.
Now, what should a partner be asking their customer in order to, determine licensing? What are those big questions that they need to get answers to?
Well, gosh, that really depends on how comfortable you are with the product. I think, definitely a phone a friend in the scenario if you're not comfortable. And then some of it's really going to depend on the product. I think that there's so much we can surmise from certain applications. For instance, when I was looking at the people who were moving from customer engagement and they were deciding whether they needed sales enterprise or whatever, or sales and customer service, or sales, customer service, field service, because customer engagement included all these. Really, honestly, if you have a good enough relationship, you need to ask the end users, what were you doing in here? Right. Maybe like, were you entering leads and contacts? Were you working on support cases? Those types of things. A technical mind can go in and glean that information a little bit. You can go in and say, hey, I went into all cases in the customer service application, and I didn't see any cases ever logged. That's a good indicator you're probably not using customer service, but you really need to get down and you really have to have these conversations with your clients. Like, hey, again, let's start a spreadsheet with every user in one column. And the application we're talking about, whether it's sales or customer service, or sales and customer service, or sales and customer service, Business Central, any combination. And we need to start looking at each user's individual role and sort of mapping that out. Same with Business Central, right? Like Business Central is a case of when they're deciding between which one to choose. Well, hey, are you doing like, how much are you doing, right? Because the difference in Business Central, Essentials and Premium is only 1 or 2 things. And if you're not doing those 1 or 2 things, it doesn't make sense to go to Premium. But asking the questions about the roles is the best way. Like, hey, okay, what's your title? Do you use this, right? Because some people you may find have been licensed and they'll never use it or have never logged in. Some people only need view-only access. Some people you can step down from a full paid license to a team member license. Business Central, same thing. Now that they have so many use rights, or you can see so many records for Business Central just within Teams, you might not even need a team member license in that case. You need to make sure you have the appropriate function or functions lined up with the user, however you choose to get there. And that is a situation where, like you said, if you're working with a trusted partner, if you're working with someone who's helping you with the deployment or the maintenance, or if you have someone you're buying the licenses from, then you need to ask those people. Sometimes you might even want to fact check. It's worth bouncing licensing questions off people all the time. I especially do it, honestly, in international markets where I might not be as familiar with the product offerings and availability, or you just might want to see price differences.
Right. And like, where should they look to save money and where should they look to spend more?
Oh gosh. So look at what's included, right? And do what's right. Like I said, licensing compliance is incredibly important for me. There's no Microsoft police that are going to come get you if you're out of compliance with some of these things. But you want to make sure that if people need the license, if they truly need the license, get them the license, right? Again, I'm trying to stay away from the word multiplexing, but you don't want to have someone who's like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm going to buy one D365 sales license, right? So I can set up my sales environment. And then I'm going to build a $5 power app for everyone else. And everyone else is going to access those tables through virtue of that. Man, I understand where you're trying to save money, but you're really, really flirting with disaster there.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to be tricky to save money, I guess that, or deceptive, or if it feels wrong, then it probably is wrong. We want to make sure we get them the right license, make sure they're maximizing those entitlements. We're not keeping overhead if we don't need to keep overhead on licenses because it's expensive. Again, if I wanted to have 2 extra Business Central Premium licenses, right, it's 200 MSRP a month. So over the course of a year, I've spent a couple grand, just in having these, just in case. It's not worth it. Add the license on when you need to.
Yeah, it's not worth it if they're not in compliant, and God forbid something does come down, they do get an audit and they're shut down,
Yeah, or something breaks or some functionality breaks. Just find what you need, get the right stuff. It's easier in these sort of named and assigned licenses. I'm gonna dodge finance and operations again, which gets a little more. It's up to your admin to enforce a lot more of that stuff.
Yeah.
But there are licensing reports on the F&O side which can help. And truthfully, that's coming. It's in preview, so I'm not going to dig into it. I'll probably talk about it more when we have it out of preview. But there's going to be a lot more around even licensing compliance and making sure that people are licensed correctly in the Power Platform Admin Center. We'll probably see that in months to come. Right. Running reports. Hey, this person could probably use this license or is trying to do this. So stay tuned for that. When it comes out, I'll certainly put out some content on that because I think that hopefully they're going in the right direction of helping making this a more user-friendly topic. But gosh, I'm happy to be a pre-sales engineer because I think this falls perfectly in the pre-sales slot. Architects need to worry about the technical aspects of the product. Salespeople need to know the product and recommend the right product, but someone's got to bridge the gap between connecting the two. And that's so I very much do consider licensing to be a pre-sales topic.
Yeah, no, most definitely. It looks like we've got about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to run out of time. So just kind of wrapping up here, anybody that's attending today, how can they use what they've learned today, to add value to their customers and to grow revenue, right? I mean, that's what we're all here for in the end, do right by the customers, but let's increase our revenue at the same time, right?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is it all starts with having the right conversations with your clients, right? Especially when it comes to things like dynamics. And if you're not sure how to have those conversations, bring someone like me, and I'm happy to help explore and uncover those opportunities. There is some value if you're a partner in that Cloud Ascent data that you can access on behalf of Microsoft. It's going to help give you some buying indicators, not assurances, but some buying indicators. And so those can help. There are battle cards and playbooks and things like that you can get off the Dynamics Partners website and to help sort of facilitate that. But if you don't know what you're doing or know what you're talking about, you're going to honestly become quickly exposed. So bring in a partner, help uncover some of those D365 opportunities. And then another thing that is actually really nice that we've talked about is the Microsoft Catalyst certification and Catalyst workshops. You can become Catalyst certified yourself. Maybe we'll put in a link or something later on about that. But it follows this sort of idea framework. And so if you want to go a layer deeper, having these conversations with clients, not just about the products, but about actual business pain points and envisioning technical solutions to those pain points. Some of the best ideas are things you might not think of on your own. If you ask me, hey, Blake, think of a Power App that does this off the top of your head, I might get stuck. But someone who's had a chance to do something around it or relevant to that might say, oh, yeah, I've done it. And here's how it worked. Again, I know organizations that are doing the full onboarding experience for their end users completely with Power Apps and Power Automate. Everything from adding them to Azure AD, license assignment, the whole nine. And if you don't know to think of that, then you don't know to think of that. That's why you have to have workshops around some of this stuff. So I think that is sort of an important component as well. And then once you've gotten past that, leverage those entitlements, leverage some of the stuff that they could even be doing for free, because we haven't even gotten into, and gosh, I wish we had the time, but we haven't even gotten into all the stuff you can be doing for free. Right. Through Power BI, you're going to get a premium per user trial for a number of days. You automatically get Power Automate Desktop, just generally by having Windows on your computer. Same with Power BI Desktop. You can do a lot with a Power Automate trial. You can do some stuff even generally in the either through a developer plan, which you can sign up for free, or just through some sort of Power Apps trial, or even just in the default environment if you want to get messy about it, I guess. So there's lots of ways to dabble. And so a lot of your best ideas are going to come from these tinkerers and these dabblers. And if you get the free stuff in their hands, they'll certainly figure out how to do what they can do for free, but they're going to want to expand naturally. That's just part of it. They're going to say, hey, well, I've done what I can with this, but you know what? Now I want to connect to SQL, SQL Server is a premium connector. Great. Let's get a paid license for that. Right. And none of us are going to have money falling out of our pockets over a $5 Power App per user license. But sometimes it's about doing the right thing and make sure you're providing the right solutions, because that creates sticky and loyal customers. So you have to think of that component of it as well.
Most definitely. All right. Well, I think we want to start wrapping things up here. Blake, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely have you back on a future webcast. There's so much more that we could delve into, like you mentioned. But I really like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us, and hopefully everybody got something out of today's webinar. If you have questions, comments, you can reach out to myself, or Blake will be giving you all the information on our contact information. We'll follow up as well with the recording. Link will be sent out to everybody. And again, Blake, just thank you for joining us today. Any parting words for our group here?
Yeah, sure. So always an honor to work alongside the Azamba team. They have a really great methodology for helping get, things like CRM deployments off the ground. Been doing it for a long time. So really happy to work alongside you guys and always have these types of chats together. We're good about supporting each other in that regard. If you have licensing questions, I love to talk about that kind of stuff. I try and be remotely entertaining on LinkedIn and YouTube. You can certainly catch me there as well. It's just a topic that again, there's, like I said at the top of the call, there's always so much going on about. When I was at Directions in the spring, Microsoft filled a room with licensing questions, and they timed it perfectly to the point where they wouldn't have time for questions. That was absolutely intentional. I'm sure. because there can be so many one-off questions. But hey, if you got them, ask them. That'd be my advice.